I know that in most cases we will be interacting through chat, but it should cause no problems because I should be able to. Hello, Etiata?
Only the video, but we can hear you perfectly well.
Okay, so I can continue. And yeah, and the idea is that through chat, we will also give a mini idea of how a mentoring session would look like. So I think that I have been into the field of education for sustainable development since 1996. So that's quite a long time, 24 years. And every time in education for sustainable development, we try to look for new tools. I don't know who has followed the developments that took place in the last 15 years, but while environmental issues were not really on the agenda, and while sustainable development issues were not really on the agenda in the 80s, suddenly in the last 15 years, education for sustainable development became something which is central to all discourse. And suddenly teachers were lumped with this added task. Like in your job, make sure that in some way or another, you manage to integrate sustainable development issues in your job. And of course, if I have been teaching mathematics for 20 years, or if I have been teaching a language for 20 years, and suddenly I am faced with this task of integrating sustainable development education with my job, it could be a bit of a shock. I might not feel trained enough to do it. I might not feel I understand sustainable development education enough. I might feel that I have too much work and this is really too much. So I think I have been, together with my colleagues, looking for new tools that really make sustainable development education something practical, something useful, and even more something that actually contributes to change. I personally am motivated in sustainable development education because I am also worried about what I'm seeing around me. I am worried about climate change. I am worried about increasing poverty. I am worried about our general health. In Malta in particular, I am worried about the high number of people who suffer from respiratory ailments because of pollution. So this passion I have for sustainable development education is also because I believe that education has a very, very important role in responding to this challenge. And one of the recent tools that I have explored together with people from other countries, I will be explaining shortly, is really this whole idea of peer mentoring in education for sustainable development. So, Mahira, if you have the slideshow, we can go to the first slide and then.
Yes, I'm uploading it now.
Okay. And then I will move you over the slides slowly, one by one. So the title of today's webinar was chosen to be, but is Successful Mentoring and Education for Sustainable Development. And perhaps we can move directly to the second slide. And I decided to divide this webinar into two parts. The first part gives practical tips on the art of mentoring. This is interesting for me because in a way, mentoring is an art. It is something creative, something flexible, something where the direction is not always known. That's why I love the word art of mentoring. And also how we can use our time, skills, and insights to mentor and support each other. And here I want to be very, very clear from the start. I am not referring to those teachers in schools who have the official role as mentors. I know that in many countries, you have teachers who have been teaching for many years, say 20 years, And then you have a new teacher in the school who has his or her first year in the school, and these two people are twinned. So you have a seeded teacher, a teacher with a lot of experience, given the official role of mentoring a teacher who has just started teaching. I am not talking about that. I am talking about the mentoring role that each and every one of us as teachers can adopt. So when I talk of how we can use our time, skills, and insights to mentor and support each other, I am actually saying that with the right attitude, with the right passion, each and every teacher can actually be a mentor. Basically, what I'm saying is we can mentor each other. So that would be the first part. And then in the second part, I have chosen 2 questions in which we can do a short practical exercise and actually mentor each other. So I would be really inviting you to participate through the chat. And when I ask a question, I would like you to reply through chat so that we can actually have an interactive session. I will do my best to stick to the time. So this is really just to give us a bit of a taster of what we could be talking about in these mentoring sessions. And of course, this is not an ad hoc mentoring session, but the focus of this mentoring session is about integrating sustainability in our education work. It is about rising up to this challenge that we have been given to integrate sustainability in our education work. Next slide, please. So luckily, I had this opportunity over the past nearly 3 years to participate in an EC-funded project called PeerMent, which is coordinated through the University of Malta by the center where I work. I work at the Center for Environmental Education and Research. And we are in our last year of this project. So we have done a lot of experimentation in schools. We have evaluated this project. We have created the intellectual outputs. And if we go to the next slide, you can see that from this next slide that this was done through a transnational project, through the cooperation of Solska Center Nova Gorica in Slovenia, of Solidarité Laïque in France, the cooperation of Consorzio degli Istituti Professionali in Italy, Breza in Croatia, and an NGO Mondomlal in Italy. So basically the same experiment that we did in Malta to create what we call local training groups, small groups of teachers mentoring each other. It was also experimented in the other participating countries. And if we go to the next slide, basically, we started this project 3 years ago with a conviction that mentoring is one of the most effective methodologies for teachers in training. When I say teachers in training, I am really referring to the continuous professional development. We all know as teachers that we are faced with new demands, with new challenges. And in particular here, I am talking of the global challenges like climate change, but also the local challenges, how we experience transport in my locality, in my village, okay? So in a way, we are always teachers in training because we need to keep on updating ourselves. And we think that peer mentoring is a way to use all the potential already existing inside education organizations to guarantee the continuous personal and professional improvement of educators. And here, as you can see, I am emphasizing both the personal development and the professional development. From my experience as a teacher, I saw many young teachers joining schools with a lot of enthusiasm. And then because of various reasons, sometimes linked to leadership, sometimes linked to too much work, sometimes linked to lack of support, you see that this enthusiasm, this passion, this hope that someone started with is slowly dying. So this is also about personal growth. It is also about personal development. And then it is also about professional improvement, professional development. So in my case, I used to be a mathematics teacher. So in my case, it is about integrating sustainable development education into my mathematics work. That would be my own professional improvement when it comes to sustainability. So there's always this interplay between personal issues, issues linked to hope, issues linked to support, issues linked to sometimes, feeling that everything is so overwhelming. We all know 2020, the first half of 2020, how challenging it was. At one point, we were all teaching with our normal routine. Suddenly, lockdown, 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 lockdown. And suddenly we have to figure out lots of different software, and we have to figure out how to change our lessons online. We have to figure out how to get feedback from students. We have to figure out what to do with students who are not actually going online. We have to figure out how to support students who perhaps are not going online because of lack of access to internet, lack of access to a laptop, So suddenly various difficulties. And this had an impact on us both on a personal level. I know that there were small groups of teachers in Malta who really supported and mentored each other, especially when it came to software use, because some teachers were really tech savvy and others suddenly had to learn how to use Teams and had to learn how to use different online software. So mentoring and peer mentoring, we think, are an excellent way to turn education institutions into learning communities or communities of practice. And as Mahira said in the beginning, the last 10 minutes of this webinar, we will actually focus on what it means to be a community of practice, because EPALE, as a platform, actually gives us this possibility to create communities of practice. So next slide, please. Some people ask, what is mentoring? And there are hundreds of definitions. We all know that mentoring and sometimes coaching are used interchangeably. But here, as I said, we are talking about horizontal mentoring. We are talking about teacher to teacher, peer to peer. And this is one of my favorite definitions. Mentoring is just-in-time help. I saw it happening every day during COVID times. Like I have to do this with my students and I have no idea how to use Teams, and my colleague half an hour before my lesson helped me solve this software issue. And this was done really bottom up. Teachers grouped together through social media, through the same school platforms, such as iLearn in the case of Malta, to offer support and help into each other, insight into issues, the sharing of expertise, and also at the end it is about values, skills, and perspectives. In particular, in education for sustainable development, perspectives are important. I think that we get a bit of information here and there from the media, and sometimes it's not so easy to form an opinion. So I know that, for example, just to give a really practical example, I know that sometimes there was even a research on this. You could ask students.
Hello, Dr. Caruana.
Yes.
Because we couldn't hear you for a while. So when you were saying you asked students, but then we couldn't hear you. Can you repeat that part? Thank you.
Yes. Am I clear? Is it audible now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I was saying that there was even an experiment and research where teachers used to ask students, what should we do with waste? And students would answer, recycle. And actually, I'm not saying recycle is wrong, but we also know that there is a sort of hierarchy. First, reduce waste, see if you can reduce. see if you can reuse, and then if you cannot, recycle. So this is really a practical example where we might need to challenge each other with perspectives and actually ask ourselves, are we perhaps emphasizing too much the need to recycle waste without first challenging ourselves on the need to reduce waste? So this is really like a practical example how getting teachers together to share perspectives could strengthen our commitment to sustainable development education. And then I really love this definition of mentors function as a catalyst. A catalyst provokes a reaction. It's not the chemical reaction. When I was 13, I started studying 3 years of chemistry. It's not the actual reaction, but it provokes a reaction that might not otherwise have taken place, or it speeds up a reaction that might have taken place in the future. And sometimes you try to use Google and you try to figure out through 50 websites what is actually the information that you need. And perhaps a 3-minute conversation would take you straight to the source that you need. So I really love this definition of mentors function as a catalyst. Okay, next slide. This is actually the perspective we chose in the peer ment project. So some mentoring, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, but some mentoring takes quite a top-down approach. Like I explained in the beginning, an experienced teacher mentors a less experienced teacher. It's sort of one way. In the case of peer ment, we took a bit more of a horizontal, peer-to-peer. And it's very interesting that when we collected feedback from teachers through our evaluations, you had a number of teachers that said that the peer ment project managed to break the intergenerational gap. I think this was really something wonderful that came out from the project, that while you had a tendency for the teachers who have been in the school for 20 years to group together, and the new teachers that just started to group together, and there wasn't so much communication, through using this group style where you have a group of 6-7 teachers with different years of experience and different approaches coming together to mentor each other, it actually managed to break this intergenerational gap and create more cooperation. So we use this group style, and then we also introduced a bit of what you can call a top-down, if you want, approach, where sometimes you had an educational expert, someone who's an expert in education for sustainable development, to support the process. But of course, it is the teachers in a circle, the teachers in a group, the teachers horizontally who mentor each other and take decisions. But sometimes you would need to turn to the education as specialist and ask the education specialist, I have no idea of how to integrate sustainable development education into algebra in mathematics. Is there actually a way of how I can do it? And then the expert can say, listen, let me show you this lesson plan. It has been done before. Let me show you how, in the case of climate change, we talk that the emissions need to be kept below a certain threshold. In mathematics, that would be an inequality, less than or equal to. But perhaps people wouldn't make this connection, that actually what we learned as young children, where we used to have this symbol of greater or equal to and less than or equal to, we can discuss it in terms of the emissions need to be less than or equal to this amount in order to cap global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. So that would be an example where the education specialist can intervene to help the group of teachers who might not have so much expertise in education for sustainable development to understand that this can be done. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. And this is also what came out from the questionnaires that we did amongst teachers. Of course, the idea of shared expertise. This has been challenged a lot when Paulo Freire talked about and challenged the banking model of education. Paulo Freire was the guy who said education is not about I have something in my mind and I transfer it to you. It's not a copy and paste, but it is the idea of a group coming together that can actually create new knowledge. So this is the idea of shared expertise and the coming together of teachers to create new knowledge, new lesson plans, new approaches that work in the context that only the teachers know. So this is why in point 2, we talked about a model where teachers are trusted and their professional autonomy respected. This was a crucial point, and actually the project was more successful where teachers felt that their professional autonomy was respected and that the outsider, for example, the education specialist, respected this autonomy and also supported it. Or the head teacher respected this autonomy and also supported it. So it is about enhancing supportive relationships between 2 or more people, sharing knowledge and experience, and providing an opportunity to learn from different perspectives. And then the last point was the communities of practice. I will not enter into so much detail at this point because it's coming soon at the end of this webinar. But remember that a community of practice is really about sharing, but you need what we call a domain. You need like a topic that unites this community. And in our case, it is education for sustainable development. That is the domain of this community of practice. So the teachers, the educators are coming together, not just to support each other, but to support each other in particular in integrating sustainability in our work or across the school. Next, please. Okay. I'm saying this not because I'm assuming that you who are following this webinar are not aware what education for sustainable development means, but I am saying this because I think that there was a very political aspect in this project. And when I say political, of course, I am referring not to party politics, but I am referring to the transformation of society. It is about empowerment. We all know through sociology that sometimes education can be a replica of the status quo, or it can challenge the status quo. And in the case of education for sustainable development, it is about challenging the status quo. It's about empowering learners to take informed decisions. So it is not about, I understand the science of climate change. That is the knowledge. I understand carbon dioxide and its impact. That's the knowledge. But education for sustainable development is about empowerment, empowering learners to take informed decisions and responsible actions. So even the methodology that we introduced in Peerment was based on what we call a web quest. It is outside the remit of this particular webinar to talk about web quests, but later on I will introduce you to the website of Peerment. And on this website of Peerment, you are able to actually download web quests for free. Web quests are like enhanced lesson plans, which are based on research from the web. So we support students in getting information from the web and then using this information to take responsible actions, to be change makers. And we have some examples of these web quests on our website, because as I said, education for sustainability is really to then lead students to investigate solutions and then act on those solutions. And then, of course, it is for environmental integrity, economic viability, and a just society. These are sort of the 3 pillars of sustainability. the environmental aspect, the economic aspect, and the social aspect. But we also know that this has been challenged, so we added the cultural aspect. So it's for future and present generations while respecting cultural diversity. And education for sustainable development is about lifelong learning and an integral part of quality education. I remember my director at my workplace used to say that education for sustainable development is at the end good education. What do we mean by good education? An education that is relevant for today. And what does relevant for today mean? Relevant to today's challenges, relevant to the big issues that we talk about, environmental issues, poverty issues, social issues. So you can go to the next slide. And this is like a further definition of education for sustainable development. I think I explained it already. It is a transformation education which addresses learning content and outcomes, pedagogy, and the learning environment. Over here, when we talk about learning environment, so we are talking also about cooperation versus competition. We are talking about the school practicing what it preaches through creating in the school a microcosm of the type of society that we would like to see. So that gives me the first half of the webinar, and it is 10:30. So I am surprised myself because I said I will divide it into two, and I finished the first half exactly in time, half an hour through. So, Mahira?
Yeah, if we're going to discuss the following questions, just a reminder for the participants to use the chat box.
So I'm going to ask this question. You're going to see it in front of you. And I would like you to try and answer these questions or react to these questions or share something to these questions on chat. Because as I said, I would like to use the second half of this webinar as something interactive. So just think of the past scholastic year. For surely challenging, COVID, lockdown, but also anything during the scholastic year which could have preceded COVID or something linked to the school relationships. Try and think of one situation you encountered this year where you would have benefited from mentoring or from what we call the just-in-time help. And if you feel like, I would appreciate if you think it is not too personal, whether you did get this help, from where did you get this help, was this help coming from your peers? So I invite you to share something on these lines. In the meantime, I will have a look at the chat to see what is being said. Okay, so we can start typing any responses to the question. The first point I'm seeing is most of us have shared experiences regarding adapting to the new reality. I think supporting peers has strengthened relationships. Can you perhaps expand a bit on this and what were the main difficulties in adapting to this new reality? And of course, I invite others to add points.
Dr. Caruana, if I may.
Yes, sure.
I have to mention something because there are some participants who are adult educators today.
Sure.
And that means that some of them had to go online in a few days, you know. And I saw something happening, like when we gave the training to them to go online, I saw that some of them ended up helping each other. So they were creating their own online learning, and this was because they wanted to. And some of them even had more than one session to help each other out. So that was really great to see happening from their own experience. So things like that, I think, are good to mention here.
Exactly. I think it's very, very important. And here I'm seeing also a point that we had challenges regarding the digital use. And I admit with you that I myself had challenges with the digital use. One of my mentors was my 14-year-old son. So, and I actually did last webinar on EPALE with my younger son here and telling him, Vanni, help me use WebEx. Vanni, help me use WebEx. And today I am on my own because I feel a bit more confident. Okay, I'm seeing I benefit from just-in-time help as I had my lesson prepared online, websites for my students to see, to arrive at school to have found out that there was a power cut due to a building site next door. I was fortunate to have been given some handouts from another to use for my students. Really great, because this is really like the unforeseen, when you think that things are planned and suddenly, and you need a quick plan B. So I fully sympathize with this situation, and I can imagine how much your peer appeared as an angel at that time. Yes, we had 30-minute session to train ourselves on the WebEx platform with 2 adult educators. So this is really about sharing skills, but with various support from others. And by practice, we got integrated. And we have an agreement, yes, indeed. And then I'm seeing also I had collaboration with Keith from Digital Literacy so that these webinars can take place. So even these webinars themselves are the result of shared experience. As regards to teams in secondary education, we had a lot of support from the Digital Literacy team. I also know that students had issues, and I also know that parents had issues. I myself met parents who were a bit overwhelmed in trying to support their children in making sense of digital platforms and online learning. But it's great to hear that you felt that there was this support. Any other points or ideas that are not specifically linked to the digital world? In any case, I also have a comment about the digital world, but I'm waiting just to see if there are some other points.
Hello.
So yes, as eTwinning ambassadors with our NS coordinator at eTwinning Malta offered the webinars as well. Yeah, and then yes.
Yes.
Sure.
First and foremost, I wish to thank Mahira for giving us training to. My students are very pleased that we had online lessons. In fact, in September, and I still give them online sessions, but individually, and together they share the work they're doing. I correct it, and I mean they're working together, and I feel very pleased. But I thank Mahira. And another thing is that I want to point out is that I was in the SMT at school at Maria Assunta, and when I started as assistant head there, I noticed that teachers used to work individually. But then I am always doing, courses and everything. And when I finished my course, I learned a lot. Then by training and experience, the teachers were to work in teams as a group, for example, according to languages. Did very good. And
This
I
is
mean,
really,
I'm saying that
really
because
great. Thank you.
it really worked. Yes, pardon?
No, this is great what you're saying, because it's interesting to see how actually a crisis, if you want, helped actually create better relationships and helped create new links.
Yes. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Before I go to the second question, because I am a bit conscious of the time. Yes, any more points, please?
Għajli, għeddu fuq webinar. Għajli. Iva.
I will unmute.
Good,
I will
faċċa
mute
confirm beda.
Miss Sherry because I think she's talking to someone
Sorry,
else.
would you like to?
Okay. Okay.
Excuse me,
before
but I
I
have
go
to go
to
from
the-
the education department, that's why.
Sure. Before I go to the next question, because I'm coming from Mahira, did you mute? Okay.
Speak
Before
now. Hello,
hello.
I can speak.
So we have, I think, Miss Berry who would like to speak. Dr. Caruana, if it's okay with you.
Sure. I'm fine. Yes.
So morning, I'd like to continue with what Madeline Sherry was saying. She's a colleague of mine too. In my case, if it hadn't been for Mahira at the very beginning, I don't think I would have made it. She gave me more to me, totally new. This was something that we had to learn over a weekend. We had to face the class the next day, but Mahira was always there. I must thank her again. And then later on, whenever we had any difficulties, our center coordinators were always there to help us. Again, if they weren't there, I don't think I would have continued the lessons. But fortunately, with all this help, I think we've done a good job. For those of us here who have continued this scholastic year with the new form, I think with all the help we had, I think we've made a good job out of it. I must thank everybody for it too. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing also, yes, another contribution. The COVID situation has changed the previous idea with teachers that work is only on their own, and now all teachers have changed this to sharing information. This is interesting because even from the Peerment project, most feedback we got was saying that unless teachers get over this idea of working on their own and get over this idea that the resource I produce is just for me, it is very difficult for this peer mentoring to be successful. Before I go to the next question, I would just like to do a short reflection because, like I told you, since I am coming from a sustainable development background, I would like to shift for moment, just as a means of reflection, the question of the digital divide to a global issue, which is about poverty, because actually my background originally was as a volunteer with non-governmental organizations working for poverty eradication. So it's interesting also to see how this digital divide that we experienced ourselves through different levels of digital literacy, of how it impacted the world globally. And I'm going to just read a short paragraph, which is the result of reflections from the European development NGOs called Concord. And it says, digitalization is transforming the world whether we like it or not. New information and communication technologies are proliferating so quickly in such a multitude of directions all over the globe that it is hard to keep track of the changes, let alone understand their full implications. One thing is clear, however, with around half of the world's population still not connected, those who remain in the analog world risk being left far behind. Some would even argue that they risk being pushed further behind. From news and entertainment to education to e-health and other government services, the internet has been playing an increasingly central role in our lives. As a result of COVID-19, the internet became a prerequisite for being able to participate in society. The so-called digital divide between those who have access to information and communication technologies and those who do not was made very stark. Being connected can be a lifeline, whether it's access to cash transfer apps or domestic abuse helplines. Those who have little to no access to digital technologies find themselves unable to adapt to rapidly evolving situations. And these kinds of instances and examples are only going to increase going forward. So I wanted this really to do a reflection also of how, I will say yes, of how what we are experiencing in a mini way amongst ourselves as educators, how it was experienced on a local level and on a global level. I myself know that even in Malta, many teachers said that they found difficulty in reaching out to some students. I know from some of the care workers that live in Malta who have children abroad, some of the care workers that are supporting their children overseas, I know that some of their children could not go to school because their village is not connected. And this extract, someone is asking from where was this extract taken? It is taken from the latest newsletter of Concord. If you want to check the website, it is concordeurope.org, CONCORDEUROPE.org, concordeurope.org. So this is the result actually of a reflection of the NGOs that are working for poverty eradication and how they observed that this situation affected society. And I just felt it was my responsibility as a sustainable development educator to put also our mini discussion in the wider global context. Can we go to the next slide, Mahira, please? And I have to go out of the chat now, so, okay. This was my second question, and I would appreciate if you have something to share about this. I'm asking, mention one education for sustainable topic you think ought to be tackled as a matter of urgency in the curriculum you teach. And I'm leaving it wide. The curriculum you teach, whether you're an adult educator, whether you're a school educator, whether you're a trainer, a coach, a mentor, an issue, an environmental challenge, a development challenge, a social challenge that you really think as a matter of urgency or that you feel as an educator responsible for integrating in your education work. I would appreciate if you would mention this so that we get an idea amongst our small group what are the sustainable development topics that we really feel responsible for as educators. And then perhaps we can share whether we really feel prepared for such an add-on. I don't know, like if I have to integrate climate change education in my work as a mathematics teacher, do I feel prepared to do this? Do I envisage any difficulties? And what help will best serve me in attaining this goal? I think the question is there, and in the meantime, I'm going to the chat to see, because I think some of you are sharing already. Okay. Okay, so someone is mentioning first aid courses. And of course, we realized also the huge work that was done through certain NGOs or through certain organizations such as the Red Cross to prepare for the pandemic. Sustainability as regards to the environment, yes. It could be the environment, it could be social justice. Yeah. especially now that we are producing more waste through COVID. This could be a really interesting topical discussion. Spaces and how can a community make use of it? The question of open spaces, the question of the school, not only as a learning environment for students and pupils, but as a learning environment for the village, for the community. Multiculturalism, how to better deal with the increasing interculturality in our learning environments, and not only multiculturalism as a state of fact, but the whole idea of the exchange of good practice amongst cultures, the whole idea of interculturality as the sharing of good practice and the challenging also of each other. The question of poverty. I had some of my friends and colleagues that were volunteers in distributing food during the time of COVID, and some were really shocked with the poverty that they experienced. So I think these are really issues that we need to be talking about. The question of waste, these are topics which are very relevant to local and global challenges, correct? Let's envisage that some technology lessons for those teachers have not been brought to the computer age and are not technology natives, to be given some sharing of practices. Yes, this is a very concrete suggestion. I think we should help the students to learn and use technology in the correct way, because the epidemic and pandemic made students use technology frequently. This is also an interesting observation. I sometimes used to talk to friends of mine who are parents, and I got different reactions. But some of the reactions was like, how is your child doing during the pandemic? And like, I got some of these very short answers, like nothing, all the time spent on the mobile. Especially students of the third age. So this is referring to those that are afraid of technology and are demotivated. Yes. And also perhaps in view of the short reflection that I read from Concord, we can also think of this digital divide. I know that, for example, in certain countries, it was amazing how radio took over, because it was easier to communicate through radio in certain villages, and it was a more appropriate means of technology rather than the use of the web. We can't have face-to-face education. Distance learning is widening day by day. We actually had some reflections even in the Peerment project on this, because some felt that distance learning training groups were an excellent substitution, while others really missed this face-to-face interaction. The challenge was that we were not prepared for this COVID-19, but now we have to think and prepare for future similar situations, especially educations in technology and health. I think this is something which I would really like to encourage. I might be wrong in what I'm saying, but from the information I have, Taiwan was a country that, because it already had a previous pandemic, which was SARS, they were one of the most prepared countries for this pandemic, because they had a plan in action which they just needed to activate. In most countries, in Europe at least, most of us did not have any plan, so we had to devise the plan rather than activate it. But I fully agree with this suggestion that now we should have plans in place which we could activate at any time according to the evolving contexts of opening, closing, and so on. Topics on health could be taught in schools. I think this could be an entry point, actually, to reflect on our environment. We all know that there is a very close link between health and environment. And we also know that having briefings about COVID made people conscious about health. but we also know that there are many environmental factors such as air pollution, where perhaps we don't talk so much about them, and also the links between some terminal diseases and terminal illnesses and environmental factors. So perhaps we could take this as an entry point to talk about environmental issues. So yes, health and the environment. Okay, I think that's great. Mahira, I'm a bit conscious for the time, so I don't know. I don't know, but I'm seeing that health and the environment could be an interesting entry point. The digital divide could be an interesting entry point, and the reflection of the digital divide, both on a local context and on a global context, and how we can make sure that this digital divide is bridged rather than pushing people further apart. I think these are some interesting conclusions that I can see from this mini mentoring session. And thanks for all the sharing. I don't know, Mahira, perhaps we can go to the next part of final reflections. Great. So, asking for answers because the time is limited. Can you hear me, Mahira? Yes?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. For someone who sound,
so
I thought
you will be concluding. Am I getting this right? Or will there be some other slides?
I will go over the remaining slides, but I will not keep on asking for answers to the questions so that I will finish roughly in time. Exactly.
All right, perfect.
So in particular, I was referring to these questions. I'm not asking for an answer now, but these are more questions for reflection. So in the case of Peerment, we use local training groups, small groups that meet on a regular basis to support each other. We are asking this question, can this be replicated in other schools which were not part of this process? Can this be replicated in other countries that were not part of this process? And are you who are participating in this webinar interested in creating a small group to support each other and to mentor each other? This does not need to be a formal group. It could be a WhatsApp chat, it could be a Facebook private group, or it can be a more formal group where you commit to meet once a month during a free lesson or during break or after school hours to actually systematically take different topics and discuss them. So the formats could be from extremely informal, WhatsApp, Facebook, other social media, to a bit more formalized that we commit ourselves once a month to support each other and then take a coffee together. And then the final question is, how do we feel about an online community of practice specifically focused on sustainable development education across the curriculum, possibly taking the digital divide, taking health as entry points to sustainable development issues, as came out from this short webinar. So those are the points for reflection, and then we can go to the next slide, Mahira. And I know that you also wanted to say something about this slide. So basically, these are two URLs. The first one is the URL of the Peerment project, where you can download free web quests. You can also revisit this website in around a month time, where the number of web quests will triple, because we have some other 15 web quests prepared which are still not uploaded. These are like free lesson plans that can give you ideas. And the second URL is an extremely new community of practice that we have just opened up on EPALE, really brand new, opened up this week. And I know that Mahira would like to say something about it.
Yes, I'm going to stop sharing the screen for now. But basically, we wanted the participants who were in your first webinar and participants who are here today to have a sustainable outcome out of these webinars. And basically, it was decided that Dr. Caruana he created a community of practice on EPALE, which means that there is a group on EPALE, specifically for education for sustainable development. And if you're interested, you can join this group. What I'm going to do, Dr. Caruana, is to show them how they can join in the group.
Exactly.
So that they are aware. First, you need to register on the platform. So that is before you can join a group. And if you give me just a few seconds, I can open the EPALE platform. Okay, and I will share my screen accordingly. So here you can see that this is the EPALE platform. First, you need to register, but if you registered, I have to log in, and I'm logging in. It might take a while to upload. In fact, you always have to tell EPALE that you're not a robot. This is also to prevent any spam messages. And basically, when we enter the platform, there is a tab, Community of Practice. So I go to Community Activities, I press on that tab, and then the first one is Communities of Practice. So I click there. And then I have to search for the group that I would like to join. There are many communities of practice. You can browse the communities of practice over here, but what we want you to search for is peer mentoring. Dr. Caruana. I applied the peer mentoring in my search. And over here, you can see the community of practice. Underneath, there are the number of members. There are 3 because it was recently created for this webinar. And then over here, there is unsubscribed from group. Of course, if you're not subscribed, there will be a join meeting, but join button, not join meeting. And you click on join. And basically, this is the group, the community of practice. And we can share the news, any news. We can share any events, documents, discussions, and we can see the members as well, those who are joining the group. So that's about it, about the community of practice. I will also provide the link in the chat box for you. Okay, Dr. Caruana, can you hear me? Hello? So it seems Dr. Caruana is here, but I can't hear him. Let me unmute you. Hello, Dr. Caruana. I will unmute you again. Hello?
Okay.
Okay, I can hear you now. So basically, I showed them how they can join the community of practice on EPALE, like a live demonstration. And hopefully we'll have the participants joining in on the community of practice that you created.
Exactly. I've just uploaded on chat of the Concord from where I read the reflection about the digital divide. Okay. I think it's time to start concluding. So I will just take you over the last 4 slides. Perhaps Mahira, you can go back to slide 16.
Yes.
Okay, great. So basically in these last 4 slides, I am only taking literally a copy and paste of the action that I did to the community of practice. So this is actually just to guide you on what it is about that this community of practice will be dealing with. First of all, I wanted to really make it clear that teachers are adult learners and that their professional development is a form of adult education, which shifts the focus of professional development to the needs of teachers and the different contexts in which they learn and teach. I think this is something we really need to start talking more about. I've read some shocking statistics in Malta of the number of educators that left the profession over the past years. So I think really we need to start talking about these issues. And also from the Global Action Programme on Education for Sustainable Development, it's quite clear that UNESCO identified globally that one need of teachers is that to build their capacity in education for sustainable development. Next slide. So according to UNESCO, as powerful agents of change in the educational response to sustainable development, educators and trainers must first acquire the necessary knowledge, skills, values, motivation, and commitment to introduce ESG teaching and institutions, make education relevant and responsive to today's global challenges, and help society in general transition to sustainability. So what we're saying is that this community of practice is to offer a new space so that as powerful agents of change, teachers can support each other. Next slide. So this goes back because I needed to introduce Spearmint to the community of practice just to respect the roots of what inspired me to open this together with the fact that I am an EPALE ambassador. So the idea is to continue this process through EPALE. And then the next slide is the final slide. So this EPALE community of practice gives teachers and educators the possibility to create trustable relationships with their peers and to find a support group where competencies and burdens can be shared and lightened. It ultimately aims to allow teachers and educators to be more and effective in the communication of a sustainable way of thinking to their students. I will, of course, be starting some discussions myself to stimulate ideas, but I want you to also be proactive. And if you feel from what came out today, we want to discuss the digital divide in the framework of sustainable development, someone can spark the debate and then we will support each other. And if someone feels that you want to talk about introducing health in the curriculum within a framework of sustainable development, spark the debate and we will continue together. That's the idea. So in the last slide, I just want to say thank you. And if any of these points that we discussed today, you feel that you would like support, you feel that you would like, I don't know, to invite, of course, as part of my work. I'm not asking for anything personally, like as a service that I give through university, to further this subject in your schools or in your adult education centers, I'm of course willing to help. And of course, if you would like to do it through this community of practice, I'm also willing to share my ideas, my expertise and knowledge on the subject. So thanks a lot, and thanks Mahira for the idea, first of all, to start a series of webinars, and also for the practical support and follow-ups that you do for this, because it's also enriching for me, and then it also helps me reach out to different groups. So thanks a lot.
So thank you, Dr. Caruana, for this. For me, it's been a lovely webinar because it's like you introduced it last time. You have the second one, and now there is the sustainability of the communities of practice. The last thing that I want to tell the participants, apart from thank you for joining and your enthusiasm, is that there is the feedback form. I will put a link in the chat box as soon as I stop talking. And if you want the certificate of attendance, and please feel free also to give feedback on this webinar today. So thank you very much. Dr. Caruana, if there are any participants who would like to ask a few questions, shall we remain a couple of minutes here?
Yes.
Sure.
So I'm seeing the chat just in case. And also if someone wants to unmute or anything, I can hang on. Thank you, Mary. Sure. May I ask something? Yes, of course.
May I just ask you, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. If we have other peers, other teachers who are not young, like I said, you know, for immigrants into technology, not born into technology, do you suggest that we actually encourage them? Because sometimes they are very resistant to change, you know. I mean, I myself, I'm 63 and I'm teaching, so, you know, I mean, I've been teaching for many years. I was lucky enough to have followed a course at Mahira years ago. I don't know, but I don't know how many years ago. So it put me into teaching, and it made me change my idea on technology. But there are other teachers who are my age who are afraid and who resist technology. Do you suggest that we kind of help them into joining in, or maybe like teaching in the old-fashioned way? Because I'd like to know, like, for example, now many of them, I remain teaching online because I was lucky enough to be able to do so. But others, they just stopped abruptly, and since the 7th of March have not been working. The schools have not yet reopened. What is your advice? It's nothing really to do with this, but I'd like you to know, because once we're doing this on sustainability and other lessons, or some suggestions, I'd like you to tell me, to help me, you know. And these are some teachers who are younger than me. I'm speaking about someone who are, you know, some of them are late 40s and 50s. You know, even a laptop, it's, you know, a bomb.
I know. Actually, my own starting point would be, how can we be most inclusive? So I would start from that, and I will explain why. There was a time I used to belong to an NGO, and we realized that the NGO had some 110 members, and because of environmental reasons, we decided to stop sending paper newsletters, and we would start sending the newsletter by email. But we had 3 people who did not use email. So for those 3 people, we used to print it and send it by post, because we didn't feel that we had a right to impose someone who use email, and we didn't even feel that this person should be excluded because this person didn't have email. So my starting point is that we should try to be as inclusive as possible. You know, I understand what you say, because my mother is 86, and she is also struggling to use technology. But for her, it is important, because I have a brother who lives in the United States. So to keep in touch, it is important. And I see the whole difference between over the phone telling my mom, oh, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, and she starts getting nervous, or myself or my son being near my mom while she is doing it, you know? So sometimes I would tell my mom, okay, I will send my son and he will stay near you and you will do it together. And then that changes completely, because then my mom would ask him, okay, now let me try and do it on my own while you are watching, you know? So I think that the type of support that people need when they are a bit afraid of technology, or sometimes also you have eyesight problems because of a certain age. I mean, all these need support. So you might need to increase the size of the cursor of the mouse, increase the size of the font so that the person feels more, suggest the person to change the mobile from, you know, a small screen to a bigger screen. So in my opinion, the idea is to use all the means we have to improve inclusion, but also to understand that people who are afraid of technology, sometimes with someone by their side and someone really accompanying them, you know, like with a lot of patience and at their own speed, because this is also very important that, and we know that adult learners in particular, when it comes to the digital divide and digital technology, they learn, but they learn at their own pace. Even me, who I consider myself to be tech savvy, my son, who's 14, he does chup, 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 and he doesn't even give me a chance to understand what's happening. So each one of us have 3 different speeds, my son, myself, and my mother. And we need to keep this into consideration and adapt according to the speed of everyone. And then, of course, we also know that in adult education, there are other issues. We might be meeting together to learn about weaving, but we are also creating a social space that could be so important for some people. So it beyond the actual learning of the subject that can take place online, there are also many other reasons why people sometimes join courses. Sometimes the fact of having something to look forward to be together in a group. So I think it's important to gauge from the participants themselves how important face-to-face meetings are, and if they are important, and I understand they are important for some people, to try and provide these spaces, because as we said, there are many other sub-reasons why people want to be part of a group. But it's just an ad hoc reflection.
Yes, in fact, Dr. Caruana, to kind of have this holistic approach from the directorate, and when we went online due to the fact that the schools were closed, we didn't open all our classes. So for instance, we have a number of classes, we call them open classes, where, as you said, people go, they learn, support each other, but it's more as well the learning curve and the social curve combined together. So these remained closed. And in addition to that, for those classes only that opened, my colleague had made a feedback form, had asked the educators if they feel comfortable to use technology. And nearly 30% had said that they didn't feel comfortable. But after the training that the directorate provided, then all of them, I mean, just maybe a couple, all of them went online. And, you know, our educators, their digital literacy ranged from those who felt really convinced and able to do it to those who needed more support to go online. But the fear of technology versus when you actually come to do it, I think that was overpassed with the training. So yeah, what they believe and then what they can do is different. This is what I saw from our educators, and some of them are here today and they know this. Their mind was set to go online as well, so that kind of their enthusiasm helped for them to continue with learning, and I thank them for this, of course.
Exactly. Yes. You muted, ma'am.
I muted myself.
I don't hear you.
Who is talking?
Hello, can you hear me? It's
Yeah.
I would like to inform all educators. I also did a course on Zoom with Robert Twigg, but just to let you know, WebEx is easier to use than Zoom. But when you have teachers who have students of different levels, this is more in my case with languages, or even in other case, I don't know, with mathematics or with something else, you are able to, on Zoom, use rooms. And in these rooms, you can put students of one level in one room and students of another level in another room, and you can attend to both. So those of you who have the ability to download this app on Zoom, there is this function which is very good when students are not the same level, because the students are not demoralized. Not everybody is listening to what they are saying. So that may be a little point that may help everybody.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation.
My pleasure.
Both Dr. Caruana and Mahira as well. Thank you.
Grazie. Anything else?
So in the meantime, there is the feedback form. People are asking me about it. So during yesterday's webinar, there was the link to the feedback form. Today, there is the link with a different password, which is 2345, the password. You need to complete it because otherwise we wouldn't be able to send the certificate of attendance. The link is in the chat box too. So for those who have completed it and want to leave, you need to press the X icon, which is the last button, and you can leave the session today. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.